With the U.S. presidential inauguration just weeks away, what can we expect from a second Trump administration? Hello, I'm Anand Naidu, and this is The Heat. U.S. President-elect Donald Trump is proposing sweeping economic reforms when he takes office. That includes giving tax cuts to the wealthy, cutting billions in spending from the $6.8 trillion federal budget, and imposing high tariffs on imported goods. During his first televised interview since becoming president-elect, Trump was asked if Americans will be impacted by tariffs. He had this to say.
I can't guarantee anything. I can't guarantee tomorrow. But I can say that if you look at just pre-COVID, we had the greatest economy in the history of our country. And I had a lot of tariffs on a lot of different countries. I'm a big believer in tariffs. I think tariffs are the most beautiful word. I think they're beautiful. It's going to make us rich.
Meanwhile, U.S. President Biden delivered remarks on his administration's economic performance on Tuesday at the Brookings Institution. He also gave his thoughts on the next administration's economic policies.
I pray to God the President-elect throws away Project 2025. I think it would be an economic disaster for us in the region. And it is my profound hope that the new administration will preserve and build on this progress. Like most great economic developments, this one is neither red nor blue. And America's progress is everyone's progress.
To discuss this and more of Donald Trump's policies, let's bring in our guests. Joining us here in the studio, Rina Shah is a political analyst and commentator. Douglas Sloan is principal at National Capital Strategy Group. Also in Washington, D.C., Imani is an associate professor of digital storytelling at George Washington University. And joining us from Florida, Jadan Horyn. He is a political analyst. Welcome to all of you to the show. Jadan, let me start with you. Let's start with the people being mentioned for possible cabinet positions in the new Trump administration. We're looking at some of the names: Senator Marco Rubio for Secretary of State, Robert Kennedy Jr. for Health and Human Services, Pam Bondi to be the Attorney General, and Pete Hegseth as Defense Secretary. What do you make of those choices?
I think they reflect President Trump's commitment to the voters and to the MAGA movement of nominating disruptors, while at the same time throwing a bone to more establishment types. I would say the Rubio nomination, likely to pass with bipartisan support, overwhelming bipartisan support, is more of an establishment bone being thrown. When it comes to Pam Bondi, who obviously is the nominee for Attorney General that replaced troubled Matt Gaetz, I think that is going back to his Florida roots. She was Attorney General of Florida, is widely respected, at least in Florida and generally in Republican politics. And then, the other two, when we have RFK Jr., we're really talking about someone who was an insurgent Democrat and chose to align with the MAGA movement. And I really do believe, that Donald Trump is trying to either reform, restructure, or reduce the federal government in some way, shape, or form. And having someone that is completely unorthodox overseeing health and human services is a way to honor that commitment to the voters.
Right, Jadan, very briefly, you used the word disruptors to describe some of these nominees. What do you mean by that?
So in the case of whether it's Tulsi Gabbard for DNI, whether it's Pam Bondi for Attorney General, Hegseth for the Pentagon, or RFK Jr., we have individuals who look at agencies and they don't like the way that they have been run. I would say that they have a heterodox perspective. Yeah. They have an orthodox perspective, and they're not looking to keep the status quo. They're saying these agencies are broken, and they want to reform them or restructure them or eliminate them.
All right. Rina, great to have you in the studio. What do you make of these cabinet choices, and is it going to be easy for them to be confirmed? In fact, we just heard this afternoon, Wednesday afternoon, that Christopher Wray, who's currently the director of the FBI, will be resigning in January. The nominee for that position is Kash Patel. There's been a lot of talk about him as well. So where do you see it going?
A uniquely divisive pick in Kash Patel, I must add. Nobody, I think, who has ever even been spoken about for that kind of position is as partisan as he has been in the 4 years that Trump has been out of the White House. And so to see Trump put loyalists, install these loyalists in key positions is not a surprise. But what is rather surprising is how very different Trump is painting out this next administration to be. And why wouldn't he? He doesn't want people to think he's going to be a continuation of the past. What he did in the past was put somebody like Linda McMahon as a small business administration administrator. Now she's been tapped as head of the Department of Education, which so many conservatives, particularly MAGA-ites, have talked about abolishing altogether. So in these unique picks, one thing stands out to me. He really wants to stick it to the Democrats because he's got former Democrats also that he's tapped. Tulsi Gabbard, RFK Jr. These are people that he is trying to send a message through. Now, are they going to break down these agencies? I'm not entirely sure. RFK Jr., a number of the statements he's made in the past have shown that he has a problem with how the FDA does things. He has a problem with American nutrition, fluoride in the water, for example. But is he going to go in to Health and Human Services and entirely be able to do a lot of what he's talked about in private life? I'm not so sure. When people get into these agency positions, becoming heads at the top of a federal bureaucracy that is very large and full of red tape and where things move excruciatingly slow, I think they will find out that to do what they want to do in 4 years might not be entirely possible. And that's why historically we always say presidents come to the center once they've been elected. I think a lot of these cabinet picks, should they all be confirmed, some of them will admittedly have to come to the center in how they do the job.
Douglas, looking at some of the specific policy proposals that the president-elect has outlined, he was interviewed by the American television company NBC, was asked about immigration policies. That was one of the key planks of his campaign for president. He has been threatening to deport millions of migrants from this country. Let's listen to some of what he had to say in that interview.
First of all, they're costing us a fortune. But we're starting with the criminals, and we got to do it. And then we're starting with others, and we're going to see how it goes.
So Trump wants to deport 11 million people, and the American Immigration Council said that's going to cost $88 billion a year. And then, of course, then there's the impact on the economy. As many people have pointed out, a lot of the immigrants work in the construction industry, they work in the hospitality industry, they work in the agriculture industry as well. I mean, these are threats that he's making, but are they even realistic? Will he be able to carry them out?
I don't think so. I don't believe that Trump will actually be able to carry a lot of this out. A lot of this was just campaign rhetoric that he used to get elected. He catered to his base. He catered to what turns out to be a lot of America when he said, hey, I'm going to deport all these immigrants and I'm going to drill, baby, drill, and I'm going to make your groceries cheaper and all these other things he's really not going to be able to deliver on because he doesn't have that type of control over the U.S. economy. But even the experts are saying that it's logistically impossible to go in and deport all of these immigrants. And he himself said on that Meet the Press interview that he doesn't want the nation to turn against him. When he's going in to deport some of these people, he may be separating families. He may be getting young mothers and children here are by law, American citizens, thanks to the 14th Amendment, but their mothers are here illegally. Does he want to separate mothers? He said, no, I don't want to separate mothers from the children. So that means you're going to be deporting whole families. It's not going to be a good look for the Trump administration to have a lot of this on camera and in people's living rooms every night. And logistically, it's just not possible, but that doesn't mean he's not going to do his level best to try to get it done. I do believe that he will make a genuine effort to start deporting many of these people and implementing those tariffs and drill, baby, drill whenever he can. But as time moves forward, he will see that a lot of this just isn't logistically possible to do. But that doesn't mean that he's not going to give it a good try.
Right, despite the fact he's also hired a very hardline man to run that particular operation.
Exactly. Horyn, is it Tom
Tom
Horyn?
Homan.
Tom
Yeah.
Homan, yeah. Who has no problem with deporting whole families and no problem with going into churches and in schools where they just lifted the restrictions on where they can go in, ICE can go in to round up illegal immigrants. So we really are in for tumultuous next 4 years.
Right.
I tend to disagree, though, because I think what they will say is that Obama was the deporter in chief. Obama deported more people than Trump did in his first term. And that is what will come up. And Homan and company, these are people with an axe to grind, with people who have remained here illegally. And let's not forget, the vast majority of the problem remains with visa overstays here. And so I think, again, because you've got a hardliner like Homan, we're going to see a lot of this done. And I don't know that it's going to end up on the nightly news, because so many Americans aren't watching the nightly news. They'll get clips of it, but are they really going to care when, again, what they really tend to seem to care about is the economy?
But they will care when food prices go up.
Absolutely.
Right?
And that's what it's about. It's about the economy. And so in essence, a lot of Americans are okay with their neighbor suffering as long as they are okay.
Yeah, but we could see food prices go up, we could see home prices go up because immigrants are involved in
We don't know
construction.
that yet, though. That's the thing. I remind people that he's still not yet in office. He's talked about these tariffs, but a great number of experts have told him that, hey, it's going to be detrimental the way you do it, but look at who he's putting on the National Economic Council. Let's see if they carry out what they're saying they want to do.
He did implement tariffs early in 2017, however, which caused a lot of sturm and drang for U.S. farmers. And then retaliatory tariffs came in from China, and it really caused food prices to go up. So I do think he will implement those tariffs. And like I said, immigration.
Okay, let's go to Imani. Cheers. Imani, one of the other big policy proposals that the president-elect was talking about was reproductive rights. He was asked about, in that interview that I was talking about, he was asked about access to the abortion pill. This is what he said.
Will you restrict the availability of abortion pills when you're in office?
I'll probably stay with exactly what I've been saying for the last 2 years, and the answer is no.
So the president-elect has been touting his role in the decision by the United States Supreme Court to overturn Roe versus Wade. That's the signature law that allowed for reproductive rights in this country. Now he says he will not restrict access to the abortion pill. In fact, he's also said that he will leave these things to individual states. So what are we to make of his policies?
Well, I think this is also something that we have seen him continue to double down on, which is honestly kind of speaking, dare I say, out of, two different sections of the U.S. Obviously, people who are very anti-abortion, and then individuals who are very terrified of where state rights are going, limiting access. We saw in the most recent election, a number of people did what, all of us analysts like to call a split the ticket, right? So they voted to maintain abortion access and abortion rights, reproductive health care rights in their states. And then they also went on overwhelmingly to vote for Donald Trump as president, even though he was the person who appointed those Supreme Court justices who then ultimately overturned Roe versus Wade. So I think it's very interesting to play. I will say I think this is what I believe is one of his more savvy political policies, that he's been able to, again, sort of toe both lines, appeal to his base and his conservative constituencies who wanted Roe versus Wade overturned, and then also appeal to many moderate Republicans, of course, many women in particular, who felt that was a far overreach, and they want to maintain access to reproductive health care in their states. And so it's a really interesting move to see that, okay, yes, we're going to, give these choices back down to state rights. And then we're seeing overwhelmingly where that went. But we also saw in many states, excluding places like Missouri, but we saw in many southern states immediately after the overturn of Roe versus Wade, these incredibly strict, anywhere upwards of, close to, 10, 12 weeks, which many women don't even know that they're pregnant at that point, and then restricting those rights. So I think it's something that we see is actually quite savvy, but I also believe it's quite dangerous because you're playing politics with women's health care.
Jadan, Horyn, another point of discussion in that interview that we were talking about was about the January 6th rebellion. He says he will pardon those who've been convicted of taking part in that rebellion. He also said that he will go after those who sat on that January 6th committee. Let's listen to him again.
I'm going to be acting very quickly.
Within your first 100 days, first day?
First day.
First day.
Yeah, I'm looking first day.
Issue these pardons.
These people have been there, how long is it, 3 or 4 years?
Okay.
You know, by the way, they've been in there for years, and they're in a filthy, disgusting place. Cheney was behind it, and so was Benny Thompson, and everybody on that committee.
We're going to...
For what they did,
Yeah.
honestly, they should go to jail.
So you think Liz Cheney should go to jail?
For what they did.
Everyone on the committee, you think
I think
should
everybody
go to jail.
anybody that voted in favor.
Are you going
So, Jadan, listening to that, I mean, if his Justice Department goes after committee members, what kind of message does that send to the country?
Well, I think, one, that members of Congress, when they're doing an investigation, shouldn't withhold evidence. We do know, whether it's criminal or not, we do know that the January 6th committee did pick and choose what evidence they would release to the public, what evidence they would select to be declassified. And they really approached it in kind of a Hollywood fashion. And unfortunately, the American people, whether it's the upcoming hearings into the attempted Trump assassination or going back and examining the JFK assassination, the American people deserve to know the full truth. And elected officials that obfuscate that choose not to reveal that information to the public ought to be held accountable. How that is done, that, you know, I would argue, as someone who believes in separation of powers and federalism, that Congress should police itself. The Ethics Committee should investigate those members that were aware of information and did not share it. Yeah. But in some way, shape, or form, I do believe there needs to be accountability.
Right, you say there needs to be accountability, but this selective disclosure of evidence that you talk about, the fact that that happened, does it mean that these members should go to jail, as the president-elect says?
I mean, I don't have an opinion on that. I think we need an investigation to see, did they willfully, did they negligently refuse to turn over evidence? Did they selectively choose? Did they coach witnesses? When it comes to Liz Cheney, unfortunately, Congresswoman Cheney, she is on record for coaching a witness to change their statement. That in civil court, in criminal court is illegal. Right. But I'm not a lawyer. Okay. What I can say is what we do know is that the American people deserve to know why or when evidence was withheld, especially when a determination was made into the January 6th, whether you want to call it an insurrection or rebellion, and ultimately cases were brought. If evidence is available that has not been released, then it should be, the people that withheld it should be held accountable.
Okay, Rina, I want to talk about foreign policy, but I just want to get your opinion on what Jadan just told us.
Yeah, I mean, point taken, Jadan, but I think he makes good points, but the notion that this Congress would police itself is laughable. I mean, Congress does not serve us anymore. People express that will, I think, in this election and in every election they do. In essence, what they're saying is that, we are so tired of Washington, D.C., talking at us instead of for us. Yeah. And when Congress is tasked with policing itself, it doesn't. There's still no ban on insider trading. Mm-hmm. We have people, members of Congress, sitting there enriching themselves right now, having insider information and getting rich off stocks while serving for the American public. Yeah. So that's on the one hand. But to talk about January 6th for one moment, I think it's a very important point to make time and again, despite being now 4 years past it all. Yeah. There is an important, I think, virtue that's been lost. As we talk about what January 6th was and Trump's return to the White House, this talk of jailing your opponents, simply for being your opponents, is so anti-American. If our founders were alive today, they would be, I mean, they're rolling in their graves, obviously. But they are a group of men that founded this nation, and we are still a very young nation, 250 years, not even. I will say we are a young nation that has so much burden on the people that are elected to represent us. Okay. But the major point is that we cannot have this talk because the founders were people that opposed the crown. They were opponents of the crown. So what kind of nation would we be if we allow this to go on? And it has to be pushed back on.
Yeah, I want to get to foreign policy very quickly, Rina. Trump has said that he will resolve the Russia-Ukraine crisis before he's inaugurated. He's even said at some point that he will solve this in 24 hours. How does he do that?
Well, first of all, he's still the president-elect, although we see him functioning in a very different way than we've ever seen a president-elect in the modern era function. I should note that. And that's actually a dig at Joe Biden. He's kind of ceded a lot of control by just... Look, my thoughts on Joe Biden are that he should have resigned when he said he wouldn't run for re-election. And Trump is looking ever powerful, going around the world, showing up with world leaders and whatnot, acting as if he's president before he's even taken the oath and re-entered 1600 Pennsylvania Ave. I don't know what Trump is capable of in his relationship with Putin. I do have hope there. J.D. Vance, the vice president-elect, has signaled that it would take ceding land. And I think that's what it'll come down to.
Okay. Very quickly, what about the crisis in Gaza?
In Gaza, I think it gets murkier there. You know, Trump and Netanyahu have a very cozy relationship. Obviously, the ICC has come after Netanyahu. Those Jewish Americans who feel that Netanyahu hasn't done anything wrong, I think are in the minority. But what can Trump and Netanyahu do together? I remember the early days, sometime at the top of this year, so not too many weeks after October 7th, Trump had rumored to have been saying that Netanyahu ought to knock it off. He hasn't knocked it off. He's doubled down in Gaza. It's gotten even uglier, spilling over into Lebanon. I don't know that they can accomplish what Trump and Putin can do despite having a cozy relationship. I think there's still a very big question mark on that relationship, more so than the one between Trump and Putin for me.
Douglas Sloan, you know, Trump always likes to portray himself as a man of the people. You know, he identifies with the voters of America at all levels. He says he will push, at the same time, he says he will push for tax cuts for the wealthy. He says he won't touch popular programs like Social Security, Medicare, etc. I mean, when we hear that, tax cuts for the wealthy, is it just going to be more of the same?
I think it will be. Absolutely. The majority of America is not wealthy. The majority of America, I think it's just 1% that controls most of the wealth of the country. And those are the people he's talking about when he's talking about tax cuts for the wealthy. He tries to make himself out to be the common man, you know, someone you can grab a slice of pizza with. But when he actually did grab a slice of pizza with somebody, as I recall, he was using a knife and fork to cut his New York slice of pizza, which is against all rules and engagement regarding eating New York pizza. So yeah, he is not a man of the people. He wants to engage and help his donors, and that's what he did in his last term, and that's exactly what he's going to do in this term. And we are not, even the people at this desk are not going to feel those tax cuts that Trump is going to give to the ultra wealthy, and he's going to continue that, and its donors are going to be very happy. Excuse me.
Imani, cheers. Another unique aspect of this incoming Trump administration is that he's appointed Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy to this new agency, which is tasked with cutting the federal budget. They initially said they want to cut $2 trillion a year, but they've now revised that to $500 billion a year. The president-elect has already said that he will not touch Social Security and Medicare. But there's also the huge expanding military budget, and you know, if he cuts taxes as well, then the deficit's going to start to go up as well. What impact will all of this have on the country?
Well, I think, honestly, when we look at the fact of where U.S. spending, I think I really like to go back and I just wish more Americans of at least obviously voting age, et cetera, just remembered their like U.S. civics class, if they took one, or the U.S. government class, and sort of understood how, we got to this $1 trillion debt, how federal spending even works. And when you throw out numbers that are so astronomical that most people can't even really fathom what is 2 trillion, what's, 500 billion, like what do those numbers really mean? I think it comes down to yes, our government could be incredibly more efficient. I don't know anyone who is disagreeing with the fact we are currently at a point where the federal government might come to yet another shutdown.
Yes.
And so we are constantly, looking at ways that we can be more efficient. So on the one hand, I applaud at least any attempts and efforts, but I also know that it's going to be incredibly difficult. And as someone who lives in DC, when I think about whether we're having conversations about January 6th, where people like to downplay, that treasonous day, that violent day, I find that really, really disturbing, especially considering the importance of that moment. And when I look at the way we look at spending, whether it be our military budget or even something like education, and talks and rumors of possibly, dismantling the Department of Education. And I think of myself and so many people who have children who are in the education system, not only as educators, but our children are there. And I think about the impacts of what that could possibly have. So on the one hand, a more efficient government, I think I don't know anyone who's against that. On the other hand, I think when you really talk about, cutting in these drastically massive numbers, that my question is always, I need to actually see a plan and not just hear concepts of one.
Okay. Jadan, I've only got about a minute left. I want to talk very quickly about tariffs. The president-elect wants to impose high tariffs on imports. It's one of his key foreign policy tools. It's also one of his key immigration tools if we look at how he's threatening to go after Canada and Mexico as well. But imposing tariffs, the American people would have to pay for those increases. Isn't it going to push prices up? Wouldn't that see inflation go up again?
Well, I think that's looking at it from the economic point of view. I think Donald Trump looks at it from a power perspective. Power politics utilizing tariffs as a form of leverage. We also have to remember the United States government was funded into the passage of the income tax entirely by tariffs. So it's not like it's a completely unorthodox way to fund the Treasury or run the government. That being said, I firmly believe that Donald Trump is utilizing tariffs mostly to get allies and enemies in line. And ultimately, what we see in terms of tariffs will be targeted and likely minimal at the end result. But in the beginning, we'll make a splashy headline and will instill fear and get someone like the Prime Minister of Canada to fly to Mar-a-Lago in order to ensure that his country is not the subject of massive tariffs on the first day. If we can get allies to whip into action like that, it can certainly be used for enemies.
Okay, we have to leave it there. We have run out of time. Thanks to all of you for being with us. That's it for this edition of The Heat. I'm Anand Naidu in Washington, D.C.